Guys, we're in the middle of a pandemic and these are trying times. It's hard on our mental health, our mental state. And this is why I love our sponsor today, BetterHelp. They're the largest online counseling platform worldwide. They change the way people get help with facing life's challenges by providing convenient, discreet, affordable access to licensed therapists. BetterHelp makes professional counseling available anytime, anywhere, through a computer, tablet, or smartphone. It's brilliant. Sign up today. Go to betterhelp.com/solvinghealthcare and get 10% off sign-up fees.
COVID has affected us all, and with all the negativity surrounding it, it's often hard to find the positive. One of the blessings it has given us is the opportunity to build an avenue for creating change, starting right here in our community. Discussing topics that affect us most, such as racism in healthcare, maintaining a positive mindset, creating change, the importance of advocacy, and the many lessons we have all learned from COVID. If you or your organization are interested in speaking engagements, send a message to quadcast99@gmail.com, reach out on Facebook at Quadcast, or online at drkwadwo.ca.
Welcome to Solving Healthcare. I'm Kwadwo Kyeremanteng. I'm an ICU and palliative care physician here in Ottawa and the founder of Resource Optimization Network. We are on a mission to transform healthcare in Canada. I'm going to talk with physicians, nurses, administrators, patients and their families because inefficiencies, overwork, and overcrowding affects us all. I believe it's time for a better healthcare system that's more cost-effective, dignified, and just for everyone involved. All right, Quadcast Nation, Solving Wellness Community. We got somebody special today. We got Debora Sloan. She's all things. Debora, you're all things. You're a dietitian, sports nutritionist, personal trainer, CrossFit enthusiast, foodie. We're going to get into all of this. But Debora, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. This is so fun. I'm so excited about this. I've been looking forward to this all summer long.
Me too. And seriously, I don't know how many people could see this, but Debora is jacked. Let me tell you, she is jacked. I would not mess around with her in a corner. Like if I was in a dark alley, I would run the other way. Seriously. But this is why I'm really excited about this. But honestly, thank you for doing this. I thought we would start off by what's your story? You know what I'm saying, Deb? Because not too many people have all these certificates. And, I know you're a type 1 diabetic, so I have a feeling there's going to be a bit of a story to what got you into such great health overall. So what's your story, Deb?
Well, basically, I was an art student, if you can believe it. I went through high school, not a science person, went into the arts at university, and then was doing art history and painting and all of that stuff and marketing. And then we were sort of at a crossroads. My husband got into medical school and I thought, we're moving to London, Ontario. What am I going to do? And I decided that it was sort of around the time that I started getting into fitness and different things. And as I got into fitness, the diabetes piece, I think, became a little bit more present. I was always really good at managing that. I was 12 when I was diagnosed, and it was just sort of a normal part of life. But then when I started exercising and getting into that, I started managing my food a little bit more, getting more interested in fueling and stuff like that. And I found that although I was interested in the art, the stuff that I was really reading about and when you pick up a magazine and that kind of stuff was about sport performance and fitness and exercise. And certainly the diabetes piece, I think, influenced how I saw everything because there was that added component. So I ended up taking the route of dietitian. Let me tell you, it wasn't easy. People told me that, but I didn't really realize how competitive it was. I had to go back and do high school chemistry, and that was pretty interesting. And then, there it sort of started. It certainly, I think my type 1 influenced it. It's interesting that it took me that long to realize how big of a role it would play in my life, but I always felt that it empowered me rather than held me back. And when I got into nutrition, I sort of had a feeling of what I would be doing, which, to be honest with you, is exactly what I'm doing now. So that's a cool story, I think, when you sort of picture yourself being like, yeah, I'm going to do this degree. So that was another 3-year university degree. I was a master, like I was already older, it was my second degree, and got my internship at Sunnybrook in Toronto, and my husband was still finishing up medical school. I got pregnant at the end of that. We moved to Ottawa, and I said, I'm going to start my practice. And that was it. And I mean, along the way, I was doing a lot of different types of activities. I swam and played soccer a little bit in high school, but didn't grow up an athlete actually at all. I was not super athletic as a kid. So it was something I guess I found later in life. I think I was naturally strong, and that kind of took shape later on. I got into boxing a little bit.
I knew there was a reason. I was saying not messing around in a dark alley.
Yeah, exactly.
Goddamn.
Sure, there's that piece. I boxed in Toronto, just not competitively or anything, but at a really cool spot. And then when I went to London and I was doing my dietitian degree, I found CrossFit back when it was not even really a big thing. And like I was saying to you before when we were off air, that really changed my life, I'd say, like in terms of athletics and how I feel like I view exercise and strength training now compared to just, I used to sort of exercise to, stay healthy and keep my body in shape and whatever, but it just became more about confidence and I don't know, just pushing yourself and strength. And it was like an adrenaline thing that I'd never experienced before. So, I loved it. And I love that there were no mirrors. I think that's what attracted to me about it. Like,
I actually didn't know there's no mirrors.
Yeah, you know what? Like,
to check on your form and shit?
Yeah, check on your form, but you know what? Like, you don't have to, you're not looking at yourself, I feel like that can be a big deterrent, especially for a lot of, beginner athletes, and you're like picking at yourself and you're looking at your muffin top rolling over your pants and you're just like, you don't need to see that shit. You just need to focus on like getting strong and doing what you're doing. So I love that aspect, and it was such a great community. And anyway, here I am. I've been in practice for 8 years since the day my little guy was born. I just sort of said, I'm going to start somewhere. And we were new to Ottawa, and so I have a few focus areas in my practice. I have the sport performance piece, which is probably the primary one. I work with teams and individuals with body comp, athletic performance, all kinds of things. And then there's the celiac and type 1 stuff as well that I see is a little bit more niche, but and then sometimes it all comes together where I have an athlete has all the things. Yeah, that's cool.
Amazing. So what, I mean, it's interesting how you got into the sports side. Like what drove that? Like, did that come later on as you became more athletically involved or engaged? But like, what drew you to performance?
I mean, yeah, it's kind of weird. Like I sort of just happened upon swim team and soccer team as like I'm strong and I have this tolerance to push myself that I sort of recognized, but I never had channeled that as a kid. Like I never was in sports, like I said. And I guess after high school, when I started getting more into, because I had those team experiences and sort of guess I liked it. I liked that feeling of fitness and pushing myself. When I went off to university at Queen's, I had ready access to the gym. What we knew as the PEC at the time. And I was there all the time. Like, and it just started with like aerobics classes and a little bit of weightlifting and, a little bit of running, like just doing stuff. And then honestly, at that time, I didn't know that much about fueling. Like I just sort of did what I did. And then when I came back to Toronto, I ended up saying I'm going to get a trainer, and I saw a trainer once a week. So it was sort of like a cumulative thing. But it's been really consistent since then. And I think, when I tell my clients like how to make changes to body composition, I think what a lot of people don't realize is the consistency. I mean, since basically then, since university, I've been doing stuff a lot, like without breaks really. Like I'm not crazy. Like I don't train 3 hours a day or anything, but it's been a consistent cumulative path, trying different things, boxing, running, yoga, then CrossFit, which really, I didn't look like this before I started CrossFit. So, I think that was a pivotal, I build muscle pretty easily, but CrossFit really changed it for me. And I think, kind of lifting that you just wouldn't get exposure to, I feel like, if you were just, in the gym doing normal stuff, right? Yeah. You really, really feel empowered, I think, especially as a woman. So.
Absolutely. And we were talking offline, but it's been great having Pete Shaw as one of our trainers for our self and wellness community. Because, man, he's the 29th fittest human being on earth right now.
Yeah,
for real. You know what I'm saying? So when it comes to fueling, when it comes to, giving your body the best chance to outperform, to continue to perform well, what are some of the key principles that you think of, Deb?
Really it's carbs, it's protein, it's balanced eating. I feel like I look at the pyramid of what I would tell an athlete, a young athlete. And the first question I get is supplements. And really that's sort of at the very tip of the pyramid. The base is really a foundation of a good diet. I think, you need to be eating high quality food, good quality protein, eating throughout the day. And for sure, making sure that if at all fails, like you got to be timing your nutrition well around your sport. So pre-workout fuel, post-workout recovery fuel. And most of that should be just coming from good food, good nutritious food. Your proteins, your yogurt, your chicken, all of that stuff, your tofu. And if you want, at that point, once you've got that down, then you can start looking at, the few, evidence-based supplements that you can try just to kind of up your game. And for convenience, really just to sort of what we call a supplement is really a supplement, right? It's on top of all the stuff that you need to be doing on a daily basis, and I tell people, like, you can't, go to work, have a cup of coffee, don't eat all day, which, and this is really pertinent, I think, to you guys who work so hard in the hospital and don't have the opportunity to eat as readily when you're busy with patients and stuff like that. So it's really difficult to expect that you would see the results in performance. You say, well, I have a pre-workout snack and then I hit the gym. It's like, well, what did you do the rest of the day, right? So there's a lot, I think, whether it's smoothies to get your nutrition through drinking, whatever works with the daily schedule, quick, grab and go snacks that just keep your body fueled throughout the day. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it does need to be something. And then, pre and post workout recovery, carbs, protein, it's got to be there, I'd say, within the first, hour or two after, and ideally like a top up right before you hit the gym.
So, yeah, if we focus, because there's a lot of, that's a big topic, I know, but if we focus maybe first on safe resistance training or weightlifting, you do get a lot of talk about make sure you have your, have some fuel before you get to the gym. There's stuff you're supposed to take after your workout. And the other component I'd love to hear your opinion on, Deb, is working out in fasted states, because this is this is becoming more and more popular. I'll tell you, I worked out already today. I haven't had anything to eat or drink except for my coffee and some BCAAs. So I would love to hear your perspective on a typical approach to somebody that's doing resistance training.
Yeah. For resistance training, it can be goal specific. And I think one thing that's underplayed is the gender specific piece as well. Men at different ages and women at different ages can get away with different things. So that's a whole can of worms I'm pretty passionate about. But, just to keep it simple, look, if we're talking about energy pathways, I don't think that fasted training is necessarily bad for everybody. But I think if we're looking strictly from a performance standpoint, having glycogen, so a little bit of top up of carbohydrate pre-workout, you know, and maybe a little bit of protein just before. So even just like 7 grams of protein or something, a little bit, which honestly, you could get that from a simple latte. You know, you get the caffeine boost, you get a little bit of sugars from, you know, whatever, the milk or the soy milk or something like that. And then a half a banana. So like, you don't need much. We're not talking about like you need a full huge meal if you're not into that, especially if you're training early, but just getting those blood sugars up just a tiny bit, breaking that fast, because I mean, thinking about it too, overnight you're catabolic, which means that you're breaking down even naturally, right? Like you're going through a process of breakdown because your body is searching for energy while you're in a fasted state. Although lifting and different kind of lifting is not as necessarily high intensity as like, let's say, HIIT training or something like that. I still like to see a little bit of glucose in there, a little bit of protein, to make sure that we're not actually breaking down protein and using protein, which are our own muscle in order to lift. That's not to say that fasted is really bad. And I think, you know, resistance training can tolerate it, like especially lower intensity resistance training can tolerate it a little better than HIIT training. And certainly really low intensity, steady state stuff, like if you're just doing like cardio or something like that is not bad, because you're fat burning anyways in that period of time, and you're not necessarily needing a lot of carbohydrate. But I think, you know, keeping in mind what really fuels the body and what's going to allow you to get that last rep. I mean, if you're doing sets that are heavy, if you're trying to build muscle, you don't want to sacrifice any of the muscle that you got. And I know that fasting has some of those things. You lose muscle less than other types of diets. But I would say, like, you know, if I'm just keeping it simple for people who are starting out, I'd rather see them start out with like a little bit of carbs. So 15 grams of carbs, like half a banana and a little bit in a latte. Get to it. You probably don't need much besides water. You know, the BCAAs, like if you're fasted, sure, because then you've got some of those amino acids like rolling around for you. So a little bit of protective, you know, addition there. And then afterwards, protein. I mean, that's where you'd slip in your whey powder, make a smoothie, protein and carbs. Like honestly, protein and carbs. Like if you sandwich it like that, like on either end, I mean, you sort of got the recipe for pre and post workout, right? Where post workout, I focus more on the protein, and pre-workout a little bit more on the carbohydrate, if that makes sense. And hydration is always a thing. I mean, you should be staying hydrated as much as possible with fluids, you know, overall.
Yeah, we just found out we're interviewing Dr. Ted Naiman, and one of the things that I think we underappreciate is how much protein we actually should be having, depending on your goals, obviously, whether it's maintenance or to build muscle. But most people are probably under proteinizing, if that's a word. I just made it up.
Yeah, I mean, I see two things happening. I mean, for starters, I will say that I think the Health Canada's guidelines for protein intake is off base, way too low, way too low for, I mean, you know, sufficient, like we're talking like you're not gonna get kwashiorkor or something like that. But I mean, for most people, especially those people who are trying to maintain a good body composition, like not even athletic performance, I mean, for satiety and for all kinds of other things, especially females, like after the age of 40, I mean, 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram of protein is really, I mean, it's sufficient, but it's not, I don't think it's optimal. And then I think there's those people who think, you know, they don't know what a serving of protein really is. So they have people who are, when I say, you know, you need a gram of protein per pound of body weight or of healthy body weight, they think that means they need to eat like 14 chicken breasts a day, you know, when in reality, like a palm-sized piece of chicken breast, which is about 3 or 4 ounces, is like 35 grams of protein. And that's probably like, I mean, if you had that 30 to 40 grams of protein at your meals, and then a little bit here at snacks and in your recovery nutrition, you're going to hit the mark. Do you know what I'm saying? So, but I do see a lot of people, especially those who are skipping meals or, plant-based people who just aren't necessarily thinking about it. And it's a little bit more challenging to get it. It's not as readily available. They have to put a little bit more planning in that, they are low in protein. I mean, they're not getting that gram per pound. And I think that can make a huge difference. Energy, body comp changes, if that's what you're going for. I mean, we're not even talking like gains here. We're just talking like, I think even just weight maintenance, there's just so much evidence around high protein diets, without a lot of risk, I think is the main thing too, unless, there's kidney disease or something like that, which, even then I think we're seeing more and more the positives of high protein. Absolutely. With very, very, very few negatives, really.
Absolutely. No, these are very good points. Cause I do. I mean, as a non-nutritionist, but like reading more and more about this, I definitely hear you in terms of, we were probably under recommending protein ingestion. And there's, I mean, as you mentioned, so many benefits, like you'll feel fuller, energy's up, you're likely to eat less bullshit.
Right.
If you're all proteined up. So
100%. And I mean, I think too, for people who are being more mindful of their weight and are keeping their carbs lower, which I'm cool with too, you think you don't need to eat a lot, you just need the right kinds around the right times. If you're eating a higher protein diet, some of that is also, might break down into a little bit of glycogen as well. So you're almost, I mean, on so many levels, protein has so many benefits, right? It spikes the metabolism a little bit. It keeps you fuller. Less of that energy gets stored as fat. I mean, I could go on and on. So, I mean, I feel like if there was like one takeaway from today, whether it's like related to athletic performance specifically, or even just, weight management and health, I think looking at somebody's protein intake is one of the first things that I do with most of my clients. Yeah.
I love it. So how much of the approach changes if you're thinking you're a more conditioned athlete? So if you're a triathlete, you're a runner, you're a cyclist, how much does that change your approach much in terms of pre-post, or in that case, sometimes during?
Yeah. I mean, the during is usually much more of a thing. Hydration and glucose replacement during, if we're talking like long events, 100% different from like your average CrossFitter or anything like that. I mean, or somebody who's just, doing a Greco or something like that. In all honesty, the protein doesn't change that much. I'll say that, in my opinion. I know that endurance athletes tend to think that they don't need as much protein because they're not trying to build muscle. But in fact, what you do need to do is you need to protect muscle, because aerobic, especially long duration endurance training, is much more catabolic to protein. When I say that, I mean your own muscle mass, right? And the lower you are in glycogen, so that carb store, right, which you would be after longer sessions, the more at risk your protein is, right? Because your body's thinking, well, where am I getting that energy from? It's got to break down something. So it'll look for other things, and protein, your own protein is one of those things. So I'd say for athletes, whether you're endurance or resistance, that gram per pound or maybe a little bit more, depending on, how lean you are, what your goals are, is a good standard. I mean, look, if you're 50 pounds overweight, you probably don't need a gram per pound. I mean, I would say it's sort of more a gram per pound of ideal body weight. And if you're somebody who's not training a lot and you're just the average person trying to lose weight, I would still recommend that, not for the purposes of gaining muscle mass, but for the metabolic purposes of protein and satiation. So does that sort of make sense?
100%. What I like about it is it's kind of, I don't know, it's simple.
It is simple. I mean, it is simple. I think high protein, a lot of people say to me, but I'm not an athlete, do I need that much protein? And I would say, well, need is a word that I don't, need, but I think in terms of optimal body composition, like I usually have two people coming to me. I have the athletes who are looking for performance, and I have the people who are saying, I want to lose weight, right? I mean, I do get a few other types of people, but that would be the main thing. And for either sect of those populations, that high protein diet has so many benefits. They may not be for the exact same reasons, but they have, so many benefits. The main difference for somebody who's a performance athlete versus somebody who's just sort of, a weekender, or somebody who's just, they don't consider themselves an athlete, but they're active, I would say would be the carbs, more so than the protein, to be honest, because the volume, the recovery, when we're talking performance, I mean, fasted training could be cool for like, if you're trying to stay lean and, you want to look a certain way for aesthetics. If you're talking performance, fasted and no carb is just, it is not, like, the two don't really, does that make sense? They don't really aren't really in line, because every study looks at, you need glycogen to perform. I mean, if you're looking for speed, if you're looking for power, if you're looking for gains, whether you're a rower or, a soccer player or a swimmer or a triathlete, I mean, these are all carb-based sports, right? These are not, okay, the only person that I would say would be really doing well on really a fat-based diet and low carb diet would be a very, very, very well-trained long distance endurance athlete who has ideal genetics for that. But that is to say too, that at a certain point, their speed for distance will decrease if they don't have enough carbs on board.
I mean, Deb, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds too, but like, I do have a lot of keto friends that point me towards I think it's Master John's his last name, I think, and talking about how fat adaptive, or being like some of these there's some I don't know, some of these fat adaptive keto athletes, endurance athletes, are doing okay. I haven't looked at the studies to say go head to head, but to me, on paper, when you need energy, the basic fuel source is carb. You know what I mean? So I think if you're trying to excel,
that's right.
I think this is intuitive to, at least to me.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's hard to really bypass the physiology, right? I mean, you look at in a certain anaerobic zone when you don't have oxygen, which is like CrossFit. I mean, I don't know about you, but you're doing CrossFit. If you're able to breathe steadily and have no problem, breathing, you're not doing what CrossFit's meant to be doing. I mean, we're talking anaerobic here. So, the caveat there is that CrossFit's really short duration. So the amount of carbs that you need for that is actually not a lot, as long as it's well timed, because it's, 15 minutes or 20 minutes. I mean, you don't need to have like 14 cups of pasta, but a little banana or something like that will do you a lot of good. And I mean, that's not to say that people doing keto, aren't seeing some good results. And I would say that from a body comp standpoint, they might look more shredded. I mean, they don't have the glycogen, they don't have the fluid, that's why. So yeah, sure. From a performance standpoint, I mean, you have to do a side-by-side of, are you as fast? Do you feel as gassed? Are you able to lift as heavy? And I think no, I think that would be and maybe that's not the goal. And if that's the case, then that's fine. The reality is, though, I think that you'll get to a certain point doing that where you'll hit a plateau because you're not able to lift heavier, and you will be getting a little bit more gassed. And I've often had that discussion with athletes where they think they're doing well because they get through it. They get through it and they feel like, feeling exhausted and feeling like they're working at their max is kind of normal. But then, they start eating carbs and they're like, oh yeah, okay, now, you know what I mean? There's a difference between performing and then performing optimally. So for people who are trying, I think, to race, I mean, there's also a difference between what you do in your training and what you're doing if you're trying to hit a certain time or achieve that. You are going to be doing better on carbs. I mean, it's in the literature. Louise Burke, I mean, Trent Strellingworth, there's so many people that have done really awesome studies on this. It's not really negotiable. That being said, keto's cool too. Like I've done keto with lots of clients, but they're usually we're usually looking at it from a different metabolic approach and a different reason why. If I have a type 2, obese client who's getting into activity and they've got a lot of fat to burn, and they're not doing well with carbs because they've got a lot of insulin resistance, like that makes total sense, right? So I think it depends.
Yeah. And I think if I'm being honest with our group, it would be a lot of people that are, either trying to maintain or lose some weight and also just hit some personal best with, whether it is that, triathlon, whether it is that 5K, like no one's here is going to the NHL, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's a bit of mix, if I'm being honest, with, body composition, maintaining their weight, and just making some personal gains in terms of trying to challenge themselves. The other thing that I thought I would ask too, which I think we might be getting a similar answer, but I got to make sure I can answer this. Those of us that are playing like the team sports, whether that's soccer, basketball, hockey, any of the approaches in terms of like really trying to make sure that we're, especially I'm selfishly as we're aging.
Yeah.
I am the oldest guy on most of my hockey teams. But any advice regarding team sports?
So team sports are typically in the category of power sport. So, you've got that sprint stop, sort of high intensity, explosive work that's being done. I would say the same thing kind of goes, like I would put it in the same category as sort of a CrossFit type of thing with, potentially more carbs being needed because they can last, over that 20, depending on what you're doing at CrossFit, 20 minutes, they're usually a longer go at it. And I think it depends on how much time, when I ask an athlete or someone like you, like, well, what do you do? It's like, well, I play hockey for an hour. And I'm like, well, how much of that time is on the bench and how much of that time is actually like on the ice? Because, you're there for an hour, but are you playing for an hour? And that makes a difference in terms of my recommendations. I think, for over an hour, if you're really sweating, there may be some electrolyte needs just because of the sweat losses, especially if you're playing out in the heat. In hockey, you're wearing a lot of gear. So often there's higher levels of fluid and electrolyte losses. I would say so over that 60 to 75 minute mark. If you're playing soccer, if you're playing basketball, if you're playing any of those things, I would still say an hour before you grab a fruit, that kind of thing, like just keep it simple, or like a yogurt bowl with fruit. Like that's my go-to, or, a little like banana oatmeal muffin or something like that. Like even those fruit squeezy pouches, like just something that's got like a quick energy source so that you're, a slice of peanut butter and toast, like really simple things. And our X bar is like a go-to of mine because it's just got like really short list of ingredients, 15 grams of protein, some carbs coming in. You're going to burn it off. And then you come home and, you go eat dinner or whatever. And if you're not going to go eat dinner, you're going to have just have a shake, like a whey shake and a banana, like ready to go. And then you can kind of chill for a bit and eat a meal in a couple of hours from then. So I feel like, for a lot of people, if they're planning it around, going and then having dinner, you don't necessarily need to plug in an extra recovery snack. I think a lot of, people are like chugging their shakes when they might not need to. But if you know that you're going to be playing and then you're not going to be eating a meal for several hours, it's good to just take care of that recovery there. And I think it depends how many times a week you're going, like what are you doing? Like, is it, once a week and then you're not doing anything in the rest of the week? Like you're probably going to be fine if you just wait and eat, when was your last meal before you played? That kind of thing, So if, if you had lunch 2 hours before, you might be fine.
No, good points. Yeah. I know these are tough questions because it's like, there's a lot of nuance when it comes to that, but, what about, recovery in general? So once again, a lot of us not getting any younger.
Yeah.
I think specifically when I look at some of these CrossFit athletes, and I mean, if I did that many reps, I think I'd be in a wheelchair right now. But I'll speak selfishly too. Like, if I play two games in one day, I'm crawling out of bed, for example.
Yeah.
So any tips in terms of enhancing recovery?
So when it comes to enhancing recovery, I would say nutrient timing is the piece that's more important, especially, you gave the example of a double game. that the more you've got packed into a day, like if you have less time in between sessions, or if you're training once in the morning and once at night, you got to think to yourself, okay, so now my training's been condensed. I have less hours to fill my glycogen stores back up, less time to recover. So, whether I'm talking to an athlete or someone like you, that sort of time frame after, where we might have 2 hours on a normal day, we have, the quicker that you can get that in, the more you're taking advantage of those muscles that are super primed at that point to take up energy, right? The longer you wait, sometimes we overestimate this in most cases. I think you do have a window, but when we're talking about optimal recovery for intense stuff where we're trying to, really take advantage of it, you're the most insulin sensitive at the time right after. Your muscles are asking for it. And so from the standpoint of, take advantage of that time to eat. Even if it's from like a weight management perspective and body comp management, that is when you want to have your carbs, because they're going right into that gas tank. You've got that capacity to store carbs there. You've emptied the stores. It's like your gas tank, right? You've driven to Montreal, you're on low, and your body's like, those cells are really receptive to taking in that energy. So the protein and the carbs coming in together as a combo, right in that sort of as quick as you can after, will enhance the recovery as much as possible. So in those cases, the longer you wait, you're not going to die, but it's not as optimal as sort of getting it in quickly. And I think that hydration is a bit underestimated as well. So you will see pretty significant losses in performance, on pretty minor levels of dehydration. So I think that's something to consider as, especially as it's getting hot outside and we're just losing more fluid, even just, in our daily activities, water and potentially electrolytes, if there's going to be extensive time, on the ice, losing fluid, losing sweat, losing sodium, and that kind of thing. I don't know if that helps. Sleep is something we haven't really talked about, but from a recovery standpoint, I think there's the food piece, but then there's also the other stuff. Like, are you mobilizing? We're getting old here, man. Like, look, we can't get away with just, rushing in and doing the WOD and not warming up. Like, we need a warm up. We need, to be mobilizing after. And one of the things that I see a lot of, especially my female athletes, master's level athletes with perimenopause and menopause coming in, man, it's rough. Like, sleep is shit, and they're trying to do so much. They're like, they're feeling fatter, hormones are crappy, they're not sleeping, so they're trying to eat less, and then they're not eating enough, and then they take out carbs, and then they're just like, all of these things that we think are good, they're training more, they're sleeping less, they're eating less, so they're and then they're taking carbs away. They're doing all of these things in the efforts to shrink that, menopause that's happening, like that seems to be out of their control. But in reality, what they're doing is they're just elevating that cortisol, and actually things tend to get worse. So, it's a little bit more pronounced, I think, for females coming into that like post 40 time frame, which I'm sure is a lot of the people that are going to be tuning in. So I think that's important to talk about. But men too, as you get older, testosterone levels are lower, joints and stuff like that, then they're just not the same. So recovery in terms of sleep, like sometimes less is more in a way, sometimes more. And then, add the stress of work and you guys are in high stress jobs. It's all cumulative, not a lot of sleep. And then you're trying to work out and then you try to work out harder and then you probably are skipping meals and not really eating, in a way, it's almost like, you might just need to tone it down a little bit because you're not adapting to training very well in those circumstances.
I'm glad you brought this up because I get this question a lot from the 40 plus female crowd actually about, should I be fasting? Should I be eating more protein? Should I be low carb? And, I think it comes down to that a lot of these things can stress the body. Like obviously there's not a cookie cutter solution for everybody,
no.
But in this specific crowd, I'm noticing that things that may work when they're younger are maybe a little bit more challenging. And so,
yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. And that's why I say, I mean, and I'm really sensitive to this. I've just finished a course on menopausal athletes, and it was fascinating. If anyone's interested in that area, Stacy Sims is like, honestly, she's my idol. She's like everything to do with women and athletics. If you haven't read her, heard of her, look her up. It's funny because all of the women athletes in that category, or even just recreational athletes, they're trying so hard, but they're not recognizing, I mean, that level of cortisol is really, really important. And I do feel that fasting, like I've seen fasting work for some people, but honestly, I've seen it not work for most of my female clients. And even if we're looking at the data and the literature, it's tough. Like it's tough being in my shoes because I try to give evidence-based information. But the reality is that how many studies do you think there are on perimenopausal women doing fasted resistance training? I mean, when we look at the results of fasted training, we're probably looking at the results from like a bunch of 25 or 18-year-old, university dudes who like have no trouble building muscle mass or at the peak level of testosterone. I mean, you could probably tell them to eat French fries and they'd probably, change their body composition. So the and I mean, it goes for men too. Like I think more so for women who struggle to build muscle and keep body fat lower at baseline than a man would. But if you're looking at, even the research and the data, it's hard because there really isn't enough looking at that group at that age, at that stage of life. And so I think, you got to try different things, but I would say even anecdotally and observationally, the women that I see fasting or doing keto and trying to exercise and build muscle and train and do that kind of stuff, they're kind of flatlining, to be honest. They're not getting stronger. They're not really feeling better. And they think that this is what they should be doing. So they stick with it. And then you ask them like, well, how's your performance? Like, are you getting better? Are you feeling strong? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, maybe it's time to change that, And a lot of the time, what I find, especially again with women, is that they'll fast and then they're like, I can't figure out why I'm craving sugar and I'm snacking at night. And I'm always, snacking at night. And I feel like I'm binging at night. And they think it's because they're weak or they're like not disciplined enough or, and a lot of it comes out of blame. And I'm like, well, I think you're fucking hungry. You know what I mean? I think you're hungry and you're underfueled and you're having hot flashes and you're not sleeping and cortisol is driving that, So I'm like, maybe eat some breakfast, up your protein, maybe take a recovery day. And then honestly, things actually start to improve a little bit when that happens.
Amen. I think the other component to what you're throwing down is yes, for the performance athletes those that are taking their health really seriously, they have that resistance training element. But I think that a lot of people that at least that come to me aren't, especially peri-COVID, do not have that resistance training element to their repertoire.
Nothing. It is nothing.
Yeah.
I am like so passionate about resistance training, like you have no idea.
I mean, we've on the show, people know that. I think it's so important when it comes to your insulin resistance, when it comes to your metabolism, when it comes to your body comp, if you care, your overall physical well-being as we get older. We talk about like frailty and be able to overcome that fall that you have. I'll tell you, even one of my favorite stories was a patient we had that, in the ICU in his 70s, worked out 5 days a week and had a cardiac arrest. And I promise you people, he would not be at home right now being able to play with his grandkids if he wasn't having that level of fitness and physical training.
I mean, look, I think, there's a few things. I mean, I think with COVID, one of the things a lot of people have lost is just that NEAT, the like non-exercise associated thermogenesis, like that.
I've never heard that term.
So basically, like when we look at what's contributing to our daily energy expenditures, we have like the RMR, that resting metabolic rate, right? Which is your height, your weight, your age, whatever, your gender, different components, your muscle mass. You've got the exercise, right? So that depends on what you're actually doing, the intensity, the volume. And then we have what we call this like NEAT. So the non-exercise associated thermogenesis, which includes like just, the fact that you're ambulatory and not lying in a hospital bed, you're doing daily things. And I think for a lot of us, we put a lot on that 30-minute of exercise that we're doing, that, we're not in the gym and we're panicking that, we're not working as hard and stuff like that. But we're underestimating the fact that a lot of that energy burn comes from just, the fact that like before COVID, I was getting in the car, taking the kids to school, getting in the car, getting out of the car, going to the store, walking around the store, like, and then, and now I'm just like sitting here, you know what I mean? Like limiting my time out, limiting my time. So there's a lot less of that. And I think a lot of people say like, we need to focus on our exercise and spend that 30 minutes of good quality exercise and good quality nutrition. I totally plug the resistance training as a priority if you had to pick. And then think about, just moving more, like just general daily activity, like, because that stuff accumulates, I think, and it's not as stressful too. Like it's not as much stress on the body. So I think if we're thinking about also the cumulative stress of like work and COVID and sleep and, what women are going through or men are going through as they're aging and like all the stuff going on with family, sometimes adding a really, really intense workout is adding insult to injury, especially if you're not fueling well and you're not able to plan your meals and you're not sleeping well. But might be more possible is just to be doing more low level activity that's also cumulative, right? And I think we underestimate the importance of that and sometimes overestimate, that we need to be pushing ourselves as hard as CrossFit. And if we can't, then we suck, like it's not.
This is the beauty of these like the Apple Watches or your Fitbits or whatever. Like sometimes, like say back in the day, I'd always comment this, like we used to have the boys over, their families over on Sundays for football day, shake Kyremantengs, right? And if you go smoke, put something on the barbecue, you're up at them, you're getting chairs and all that stuff. You would have so many steps, like most of the day you're standing, and like honestly, it's underappreciated when you're moving. Right now, I'm interviewing you from a stand-up desk. That extra NEAT, I guess. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? From standing, that helps, yo. And it's such a good point that we forget about. If I were king for the day, these Zoom meetings would be mobile, yo. Take out, right. Stop the video, or put the video on if you want, if you really, like when you need to speak or whatever. But I'd be hustling. I'd get everybody moving, go for your walk. Yeah, like a walking Zoom meeting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the good thing about you guys, like I know like the nurses and the healthcare professionals, like at least for you are, a lot of you are up and about. I mean, I know my husband on an emerge shift. I mean, he's on his feet the whole night. I mean, the whole shift, right? I mean, so that's a nice piece of that built into your job, is that there is some activity. But I think it's the perspective of, a lot of us feel like we're not doing enough. And I think, another thing I see is a lot of people are spending a lot of time doing cardio. And I just feel like if I had to pick, plugging away like a hamster, it just isn't going to change body composition. And I'm so much more interested in that than I am about weight loss, right? And I feel like people see that as being a synonymous term, but it's absolutely not. In my mind, the difference between changing your body composition and losing weight. I mean, who cares about losing weight? Because all you do when you lose weight is you shrink that BMR, you know, and then you got to eat less. And then what, you know? So I would rather you say, like, sure, keep track of your diet and then do some strength training, build some muscle, and that's going to burn your energy for you, especially moving forward as we age, which is so important, right? Because it's a natural process of aging, is that we lose that. We lose muscle. So we're just trying to stay ahead of it. Lift heavy shit. I mean, I always say that. I think it's key.
I love it too. And I mean, one of the things too why I loved the concepts within CrossFit is you could do some of these high intensity interval training. If you add that into your repertoire, when you're going to compare that to say doing like a, I don't know, 45-minute jog, like you're going to get some more, at times you can get more bang for your buck with high intensity training, interval training, which obviously could be a lot less time consuming, especially if you're, you know, time is of the essence. Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think there's a lot of different interesting things around, you know, the science behind that. I think it really depends on your goals. Like if you're an endurance athlete and you're going to say, I want to run a marathon, I mean, sure, you need to spend 80% of your time in low zone. You got to be going for longer periods of time. But when it comes to busy lifestyles, getting the most bang for your buck, I think HIIT training is great. And I mean, I think it's just about starting somewhere with the weights and understanding that pushing the weights as, you know, progressive overload. I mean, you know, every few weeks, try to get a little bit heavier and stay consistent. Consistency is so important. So important, you know, consistency with your food, consistency with your hydration, you know, having that little bit of a plan so that you're not 1 week on and then 2 weeks you don't do anything, and then you didn't back on, and then like 4 days in a row, like I didn't do anything. I mean, it's so, I feel like that's where a lot of frustration sets in for clients, because they perceive that they're putting in effort and they're doing the best that they can, but at the same time, it's very hard to see change when there's so much disruption, right? Like a week and then there's nothing, and then a week and then there's nothing, and then they think that they're doing stuff, but at the same time, it's hard to take the step and build when there's all this time interrupting that, right? So I feel like, you know, if the realistic goal is to say, like, let's do 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week, let's do that 3 days and then 3 days and then 3 days, so that every week you've got that ability to push and grow. Because, you know, people think, well, I haven't really built any muscle, I haven't really lost any weight, I don't really feel any stronger, but it's like, but you haven't been at it long enough, you know, and that's frustrating, but the consistency just isn't there, you know? So, I mean, when we look at like, okay, I'm jacked, and, you know, this didn't happen overnight. This didn't even happen over a year. I look different now than I did even after my son was born, you know, like, I can't really explain that because I'm not training harder. I'm CrossFitting less. I've been training in my house for 2 years. I mean, doing what with like a pair of dumbbells. But the reality is that it's been a progressive, you know, change and accumulation for, I don't know, I'm 38, like since I was 23, you know, doing different things, but doing something consistently. And I think people, you know, I think it's about setting realistic goals for yourself, but sticking with it. Right. I love it so much because, I mean, we're cut from the same cloth. Like I like the consistency, the habit forming, the routines. Once you get that rhythm, you'll magic happens. Like, you know, like for me, doing some form of, you know, resistance training, getting the body moving almost daily is so, like, it's just life. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, right. And, you know, whether you start off once a week, 3 times a week, 5 days a week, whatever it might be, you know, this is where you get your gains. But I like what you also said, Deb, about making them realistic. This is, I think, one of the most underrated tools for success, because some cats will be like, yo, I'm you know, it's post-Christmas.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a new year. I got my resolution. I'm going 5 days a week, an hour. I got my
Right.
personal trainer. I'm feeling good. Let's go. You know what I'm saying? And then 4 weeks later, like I love it. I hate January in the gym, but all it takes is a month before everyone else is like, then it gets quiet again. I got my space. You know what I mean? So like, I think you hit the nail with that, Deb. Absolutely.
No, and I think for me with clients who are sort of, I think with COVID too, people have been really thrown off their routine. So it's hard. Like, look, I live for it. And after the weekend, I have usually my rest days. I can't wait to get started again. Like I feel a difference in my body and my energy level. Like, I mean, it's a physical thing for me now, but at the same time, I think it's what I would say just, I don't care what you're doing to start off. I don't care if it's yoga or it's a walk or whatever, although I'm plugging strength training. I mean, maybe that's in the future. What I think people should do, or where I think success would happen, is to say, I'm going to just block off that half an hour to do whatever it is that I'm going to do to start off. So that if it starts with a walk, it's a walk 3 times a week. And you're just saying, right now, I'm not going to worry too much about like how hard I'm pushing. I want to still enjoy this. I don't want to get too discouraged, because discouragement is like the root of all evil, and makes you not want to do it again. So I say, and for 2 weeks, just say, I'm going to do that every time, so that you're blocking off the time. And then that becomes a routine. And then you have a good breakfast after, and you're like, okay, so now I'm feeling like that walk signified the time in my day where I'm going to exercise, and then I'm going to follow up with a good meal. So in 4 weeks from now, if you're going from walking, you say, okay, so now one of the days I'm going to say, I'm going to find a workout video that I like, and that's what I'm going to plug in instead of the walk, because I'm feeling more confident now. And now you've got that routine going. So it's like, I think a lot of it is just sectioning off the time and making the habit. And then whatever it is that you do in that time, the hardness that you work, the specific program that you follow. I mean, to me, those are the specificities, but it's not necessarily the thing that's going to give you the success building, because the success building, I think, is saying that I do this, I do this and I'm doing it consistently, and it's there, and that you've planned it, and you're eating properly, and you're doing all the things, and it's all in place. So that, in 2 months from now, when you're like, now this is part of my life, now I can get fancy with it, and have the fun. And like, then you really will start seeing the success, but it's already in your schedule. You're used to it. Right.
People, process over outcome. Yeah. Focus on the process.
It's true. I think.
And it'll get you home. You'll get the outcome. But if your mindset is focused on the process, you get up, you do your activity, that 30-minute activity, whether it's Zumba, synchronized swimming, roundhouse kicking. Oh my God.
I don't know. For you, like as an ICU doc with your schedule all over the place, like what do? You just look at your week ahead of time and say, okay, this is my week. I'm in the hospital these times, and then I'm home these times, and I fit it in? Or is it just like
I wish I was more. It'd probably be smarter, but with the 3 little ones and then the schedule when you don't know when you're going to come home, I just took on this job as like a department head, it's like a lot of chaos. And so what I try and do is I focus on high intensity, like bang for your buck activities. Yeah. I like, if it's a work week, one of the things I'll do, I'll wake up, stretch a little bit, do my push-ups, and then bang out 50 kettlebell swings. And I'm like, at least I did something today.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then in the evenings, if I'm home, whether it's like maybe I get to play hockey that night, or this time of year maybe softball. But yeah, maybe I'll bang out like a 10-minute like routine, which is focused on like a resistance training 10-minute workout where I high rep, like I do a bunch of reps in a short period of time. Right. A day like this, I get my day off. Yeah. But yeah, I did squat day, so I just got to my favorite type of workout where you get to like I take my time during sets when I'm not rushed. Like I'm like the 3-minute, 5-minute, check my phone. You know what I mean? Like I got that kind of rhythm, but then just pump up about 5 for 5 kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Heavier loading. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
Well, but yeah, it's I wish I think if I was smarter, you're right. I should be plugging this into my schedule and get my plan on or whatever. It's just there's so much chaos in this house.
I get it.
In my world.
I mean, for me right now, it's just sort of like whenever it fits. So I don't have a regular time, but I sort of look at my week and I'm like, it's going to be here. It's going to be here. It's going to be here, and in reality, I do try to block my time a little bit. So I fit in a 30-minute workout, but it's not what it was, like it's not what my life looked like a year and a half ago when I, would have an hour and a half, like sort of take it easy and go to the gym and have a full thing, now it's like, and so you got to work with that, you just sort of have to say, okay, well, it's maintenance phase, like just do something that works and like in and out, like you said.
Do you worry about overtraining? Like does that overtraining? Like does that enter your mind?
Thing for sure. I mean, I would say, like I do see people who are overtraining. I mean, personally, I don't think so. Although, I feel like if you're always having a lot of DOMs, like that
delayed onset muscle soreness.
Delayed onset, like you're always experiencing that. Or, if you feel like you're training really hard and you're really, really training, and you're really not seeing changes or sometimes regressions, those are signs of overtraining, right? Because the neurological stimulus and, the fatigue, muscular fatigue, I mean, your muscles can't actually, like, if you think about the repair process, they actually need time they're torn, to actually repair and build. So sometimes, more isn't always better. I mean, forget about the nutrition piece, but sometimes, because if that's a mess, then it's a mess. But if you're overtraining and you're constantly doing more and more and more, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean more is better. I mean, as an interesting example, I love CrossFit, don't get me wrong, but after my second kid, I had some pelvic floor issues and, 3 months back at CrossFit, and I thought that I was taking my time and blah, blah, blah. My back wasn't doing great. And I thought, what's going on here? And I had to take a step away and I went back to just sort of traditional strength training with a coach. I mean, there was a couple of months spent there doing like really working on my movement patterns and a lot of core work. I mean, I thought how could I be deadlifting, 285 and have a weak core? Well, I can tell you right now, I mean, my core was like dead to the world. I was back to doing like these stability ball exercises. And when I was taking more time, I would say it seemed like lower intensity work, but it was really good strength work, like really good and focusing on my deficiencies. And when I went back to CrossFit, like 2 years later, I hadn't snatched, I hadn't back squatted. I mean, I'd been doing mostly front squat and like RDLs and all kinds of other weird things with my coach, but I back squatted more than I ever squatted. I snatched my heaviest, like I PR'd on my snatch. I mean, to me, that was crazy. And it was just a sign of like, maybe at the time, I was squatting every day. You know what I mean? Like maybe I didn't need to be squatting every day, high rep, doing like, as many cleans as I can for time to see effective results. I mean, so as much as like I do love CrossFit for certain things and I get my high off of it, I do think that there's something also to be said for, like focused, good quality efforts. And it doesn't always mean more, like.
Absolutely. But I can't even tell you how many people have told me similar stories where they just step out, work on some fundamentals, or do different exercises altogether. Then they go and they just bang out PRs for their Olympic lifts because of they got back, they worked on their fundamentals.
And I think as frustrating as injuries are, sometimes they force you to take a step back and work on something that you've probably been ignoring, which is probably why you were injured. And I would say, every time I was injured, which hasn't actually been that many times, but there's been a couple of things in the post-pregnancy stuff, like as much as I hated it at the time because I couldn't, bang out reps and do the things I wanted to be doing, which are really an ego thing in the end. It's been those have all been learning paths and learning journeys that I now share with my clients who, there's always the same typical things. It's like shoulder injuries because we sit like this and we do everything like this. It's like pelvic floor stuff. It's core stuff, that it's glute stuff, and sometimes just being in the situation where you have to change something and do something else actually is an opportunity rather than a disadvantage. I mean, even this whole, like, I never thought I'd be working out at home. I never did. And I was like, well, it's COVID. I got to do something. So I guess it's going to be, body weight workouts in my basement for a while versus nothing, because that's not doing something wasn't an option. And in so doing, I think that, I realized, I really suck at holding movements, or like really suck at isometric things, or, sometimes these high rep things with really light weights. I'm like, I'm really bad at that.
Endurance.
So, it's sort of, you find different challenges, which instead of being down about it, I feel like it's sort of an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to do something different and get better at that for a while. And I might not be, able to snatch as heavy when I go back, but I'll probably be better at other things. Right.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. Cause, as somebody that's personally had some, in and out of injuries, it's so true. Being able to focus on other activities, and like I said, I often find that you take that time, when you come back, you're even that much better because you got your accessory muscles and your fundamentals are down.
Yeah, for sure.
Deb, I got to say, thank you tremendously. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. First of all, learned a ton.
Good.
I actually, I'm going to tweak my recovery too. I do think I could be eating a little bit quicker before or after.
Are you going to start eating breakfast now before you train? You're like, no.
I don't think so. No, not yet. But we'll see. But I think this is amazing. I think a lot of our crew is going to really appreciate this. And so where can people get a hold of you, Deb, if they want to?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram. My Insta handle is @Dietitian Debs. And my website is DeboraSloanHealthySolutions.com. So if you do a search for that, you'll find me there. I'm posting recipes and all kinds of things regularly, trying to stay on top of that as much as I can. So @Dietitian Debs or Debora Sloan Healthy Solutions. I'm doing a lot of Zoom stuff with clients, and I'm starting to see people back in the clinic if they're interested as well. So, yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. We'll have all the links in our show notes for realsies. Deb, you're a gem, and I look forward to see you on the playground.
Yes.
No?
Dover Court.
Yeah. Dover Court. Represent. Thanks
so much for this. This is fun.